Hi, and welcome to the Women Birth Collective's Pregnancy and Postpartum Summit. I'm your host, Melissa Chin Casey, and today we're talking to Sarah Kaplan, a doula and placenta specialist and childbirth educator. Thank you so much for being here, Sarah.
It's an honor. Thank you, Melissa.
So Sarah founded Soul Sister Birthing in 2012. She provides pregnancy and birth support, childbirth classes, doula services, and placenta work. She's a trained birthing from within mentor, and her work centers around helping people have a centered, supported, and nurtured birth. And her dedication to authentic communication has earned her a working relationship with birth professionals from all walks and avenues. She works with midwives in the home birth setting, and she has really close relationships with doctors in the hospital setting as well, and certified nurse midwives. So Sarah, I wanted to start off by asking you, one of the things that's really important to me as a midwife is to let people know that the care that I offer, and that kind of compassionate care, that centering care, that patient-centered care, family-centered care, is not just for people who are planning a home birth. And I wanted to ask you how you feel about that. Who can benefit from a doula? Is it just natural birthers who are going to be getting benefits from a doula, or can people who are planning cesareans, or people who have, a medical condition that needs a lot of care, medical care?
Can they benefit from a doula? And if so, how can they create the right birth team for them? How can anyone create the right birth team from them when it comes to finding the right provider, the right doula, who's in the room, things like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think anyone and everyone can benefit from having a doula. I think first and foremost, one has to know why they feel that's important to them and how a doula can serve them. Because I think knowing oneself and what one's needs and what one's wants are is really important to, in general, developing the right birth team, the right birth support around them. And I think this starts within knowing how you need support, how you like to be loved, how you like to be supported. All of these things are really great for a family and for a mom, a woman, to know about herself, so she can ask for what she needs and what she wants. And also having a good relationship with your doula can also build those communication skills, and having a doula who is open to listening and learning and being flowing and able to change can really help mold that relationship along the way too, because as we know, in pregnancy and birth and just as in life, things change. So I think just being open to that as well is really important, because a mom might want one thing now that might change on the day of her birth. So, just being open to that.
But I think anyone who's along the journey or the process of pregnancy and birth can benefit from having a doula for many reasons. Support, an open, safe space, helping develop communication with your care provider if that's needed, and just really a safe space to lay your head in your heart when there's so much information influx out there. There's blogs and books and social media, and I feel like especially over the past 10 years, this has really created a lot of challenges for some families and moms, because it's almost too much, where you don't know how to sift through it and what's quote unquote right when everything is telling you literally something different. Do this, no, don't do this. And I think that creates a lot of challenges for families to know what's really, in the long run, it's not about right or wrong, but what's right for them, and what's right for a mom, and what's right for her journey and her birth, and also helping her create that within herself to know what is right for her, so she can become confident and sure of herself in a world that is so polarized, which can bring a lot of great conversation and new ideas. But at the same time, when you're trying to figure out what is right for you, sometimes that can be challenging, especially for first-time families and first-time moms, where there's so much to sift through and you haven't yet gone through that portal and that journey, where it can be a little confusing to know how to figure out what's right and what's right for you, and who to choose to support you, and really to sort of block out the noise to really figure out what a mom wants and desires. Because when it comes to birth and the the birth journey and how to choose what's right for you and who to support you, that's really what it comes down to, is not only a feeling, but knowing what you desire. And it's not necessarily getting that outcome per se, but it's having people around you that support you and love you and can listen, and there's open communication and respect, and that pregnancy is not a sickness, it's not a condition, it's a journey, it's a portal that we pass through. And to find the right support, I think, is imperative, because a doula also is not a medical care provider. Some can be, they can be midwives, they can be OBs, and they can act as in the capacity of a doula. But when one hires somebody or chooses to have somebody to support them in that role, they cannot really leave that double role. So they're still in that capacity as a doula, not as a care provider. And I think that's also something that is really important to know, is doulas are seen a lot now as advocates. And as much as I love that word and what it does to support the community and the families out there, I think it can be taken in an incorrect context, or not necessarily incorrect, because there's women out there that desire that support and that need that support. But there's an ethical lines as well, and how doulas professionally carry themselves, especially ones that want to have good open communication with care providers and create, peaceful, respectful birthing environments. Because like I said, when it comes down to it, the doula is not a medical care provider and can and should not be giving medical advice. It's not ethical for one to do so. But they can advocate for their families in terms of what a family wants and what a family needs. And that is where the communication can be driven to really allow a family to open up that conversation with their care provider that they've chosen to help keep mom and baby safe on that journey, because that's not really a doula's role. It's medically to provide that safe space. That's why it's so important for families to choose the care provider that supports them best in terms of their vision of what they see on their birthing day.
Oh, wow. There's so many good pieces in there. I mean, you're talking about supporting people to communicate, but I think before that, it's about listening to people. You were talking about the blogs and all of the information, and information I think is great when you're trying to inform yourself and arm yourself. But like you said, pregnancy and birth, it's not just about information. It's also about feeling how it sits and how you embody. I like the word embodiment, because we are embodying a baby, a child, another life when we're pregnant. And the process of birth is, actually moves through your body. So I think there's a lot of listening. It sounds like you're talking about listening that can happen. And there's a lot of being able to speak up and be heard. And a lot of times in our, everyday life, sometimes we can just be like, oh, this is important to me, but it's not that important. So, speak up about it. And it's okay to just like listen to someone else. And I think in pregnancy and birth, it is too, but there's something really powerful about just being heard and being able to like release that energy, that thought, into the world, because that's kind of what we have to do with our babies, release them into the world. So there's something about that flow and that openness that's really beautiful. And then another thing that I heard you say was that pregnancy is a journey, and it's there's many pieces to it, and choosing the right care provider. So I do want to get more into like how to walk that journey and choose the right person with when things change. But before we get into that, could you quickly just describe like when should a person reach out for a doula, and what is the practical things that you're doing during the pregnancy? Are you doing meetings? Is it just you're there just for the birth? Like, how does a person work with a doula, and at what point in the pregnancy is a good time for them to reach out?
Yeah, I love this question too. And just to go back to what you were saying, anyone can benefit from having a doula, from a first-time family, a first-time mom, to a mother who's having her 6th or 7th child, and anywhere in between, someone who's choosing a cesarean birth, or a family that is choosing fertility treatments to aid them along their pregnancy journey. A doula can be really helpful and a great guiding light for all families going through this portal, this journey of birth. And I think in terms of when is a good time to contact, it's whenever you feel that inner itch, that little, I want to say like that niggling, nagging feeling. That's a great time to start to explore. It doesn't mean you have to make contact. Maybe the first step is asking some moms that you resonate with, did you have a doula? Who was your doula? Maybe in that point, like getting on your local websites and trying to reach out and seeing who you resonate with. A lot of it is a feeling. Just like the same feeling when you find the right care provider, you know, it's a feeling. So if it's overwhelming for moms, I want them to understand that it's a process, just like birth and pregnancy and choosing the right care provider. Maybe it's just one small step that was what a mom could do today for herself, which is to think of the idea of even having a doula and what that means, and maybe writing down 5 things that she feels, you know, she's looking for, or ways that can support her, or questions she has for a doula. And then maybe the second step would be reaching out to find one. So I think any time is a great time, from before a mom gets pregnant. I've been working with some families from that point to the day of birth. Mom realizes that she needs extra support, and she reaches out, and this is what doulas are here for. We're here to serve families in all times, and any time is the right time to reach out for doula support.
And are doulas only geared toward attending a birth, or can someone hire a doula just for like pregnancy support?
Yeah, so over the past couple years, I have really been called to even being more open to the way that I'm supporting families, because in the beginning of my journey, it was very much, I felt called to supporting families through that whole process of birthing. But I've really sort of listened and opened up more to what each family needs, and really sort of been open to changing myself and how I serve families. And it really could be anything. I mean, in terms of, you know, when, how, through just pregnancy mentoring. Some moms are really looking for specific guidance and specific pieces of information along the way. And I feel like as a doula for myself, my heart is to serve in whatever capacity that is. So whether that's pregnancy mentoring, whether that's a day of birth support, whether that's just on call birth support in case a family needs to reach out, whether that's a little bit of extra postpartum support. And there are different types of doulas. There are postpartum doulas, and then there are birth doulas. So that's also something to keep in mind for families too. Every doula offers a different sort of service and serves her family, serves families in different ways. But yeah, I think that in terms of what that looks like for support, specifically for myself, I'm very open to listening and to creating that flow, that space, that safe space, that support that a family needs. So it's going to look different for every family. So specifically for myself, I'm very open in terms of being able to create what a family needs on that day, because I feel like as a doula and as someone of service, this is what I'm there for, is not to be rigid in my own ways. Yes, I have certain guidelines in terms of that, but in terms of what a family needs, what feels right for me is to be able to listen and to be able to provide that. And it can look like many things, like I said, day of support, just pregnancy support. Sometimes it's just specific meetings of going over some fear releases or what's going on with the mom, and how to help her through those little mini portals along the way. And sometimes it's birth mentoring through birthing from within classes. And sometimes it's a postpartum meeting to help a mom through that portal from birth to postpartum. So it can really look like anything a mom can dream up. I think a doula should be able to fit into that and be able to serve her needs and her family in that way.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned moving from birth to postpartum, because there's a lot of listening that can happen, and that little itch that you were talking about, right? I feel like I'm mulling over something, and a lot of times it can be so confusing for us to figure out what we're feeling. And I think a birth professional is really wonderful at being like, I know this, I've seen this, I've helped people walk through this before, and you might be confused by it, and it might be very unique to what you experienced and what you felt, but I can be supportive and I can help you through this, whatever that thing inside of you that is kind of that you're either mulling over, or that you're working toward, or that just is nagging at you and won't go away. And I think the postpartum time is a time when we often don't find a lot of time to care for ourselves. And so much of our time is dedicated to our newborn, and to be able to call someone. I'm thinking in my shoes, to be able to call someone who can know exactly what I'm going through, exactly what I'm feeling, and actually help me understand it, and do it quickly. I mean, that's such a great, in a session or two sessions, and I don't have to. A lot of times we reach out to our friends, and um, our friends can be a great support, and our family can be a great support, but sometimes they just don't quite understand how to help people through birth. And I think that's something really special that a doula has. Um, do you want to talk about like listening and birth stories, and how you help people through that?
Yeah, I think it's been my own journey, and I'm still practicing this every day. Deep listening. I think for myself in the journey, when I thought I was a good listener, I quickly learned, no, I'm listening to respond. Deep listening is a skill that takes a lot of practice and a lot of time for at least for myself to develop, and I'm still developing that. And also just knowing myself has helped me be able to serve my families. So I think being able to listen to myself and my needs. I mean, I'm a mother, I'm also a business owner, a friend. um, you know I have some family too, so I have that too as well. So being able to listen to my own needs and my own life and being able to figure that out has helped me to be able to better serve others. So this is a skill that I'm still working on, deep listening, but it is so important to me. I think this is listening and having my families feel that they are loved, they're supported, and for me, a non-judgmental, shame-free zone for me as a doula is like, this lights my fire. Like, this is what's important for my family. It's not necessarily the outcome of birth, because one does not have a crystal ball. And if a doula were to say she could, or he could like help you make these decisions that one can avoid these things, I think that is really detrimental to offer a family, because I can't promise that. I can't promise that one's birth is going to turn out a certain way. This has been the journey, is knowing that intrinsically our babies know how they need to be born. And it is just sort of like that letting go process and settling into just like the flow of life, and realizing where control sort of takes over our lives. And it's a deep listening to ourselves and to our babies and to our families and our partners. And I feel like when we listen to that inner calling, this helps moms and women really sort of develop that inner confidence And that confidence then turns into, I was thinking about this recently, like where freedom comes from and how we feel powerful. And I think for a lot of women, it is the power of choice in birth that really makes a mom feel like she's powerful. She has power to choose, but with that power comes immense responsibility. Because if a mom or a family were to leave all of their decisions up to a care provider, well, that's sort of like her putting down her sword for herself. And yes, there are times when we need to trust in that and trust in the people that we've chosen around us to support us. There are moments in birth that can be like that. And that is when we have the blessing of knowing that we've chosen the right support when those unexpected events happen. I mean, this is why the deep listening is so important. The stuff that we want to brush under the rug. The minute that your heart hears that, okay, listen, listen, listen. And we just take it and we shove it under all the things we don't want to happen or we don't want. I think that those are the things that we should listen to the most because those are our fears. It's not that we have to dwell on them or create them in our life, but if we just do a disservice to them and not look at them, I feel like that can also be a really big challenge when we don't listen to those calls because we want to listen to the perfect birth listen like that, what that feels like in our bodies. We want to listen to that, but also I think there's something to be said to honor the deep listening of things that make us really uncomfortable, and to have a doula or to have someone there that can help support you through that set of deep listening. I think that is really a special thing to have that support in your life as well, and along the birth journey process and through the portal of postpartum as well, especially when
like you said, it's hard and people don't, you learn so much about birth, but sometimes when women get to postpartum, they're like, why didn't anyone tell me about this? This is hard. And to not have that support there can sometimes feel crushing to moms. And I feel like that's when the village is needed. And this is when support is there. And moms should never feel alone. It's just being able to find the right community. And this is why I think what you've created here is such a blessing for women and for families. Because sometimes it's women, sometimes it's someone's partner that needs to reach out. Like mom is not able to. So to be able to create communities where families can go to find the support they need, I think this is what's really needed in our communities today.
Yeah, I often wonder if it's our isolated society that kind of is the breeding ground for so much postpartum depression and mental health issues after the baby. And it's a great point to have, the support set up beforehand. So maybe you don't necessarily, like you said, feel like you need a doula for birth, but you want to establish a relationship with someone. And it's great if you already have that in place for postpartum because it's hard to do all of that work when you're, first of all, in the moment of like, what, now what?
Yeah, when you have your little baby.
Feeding a newborn, sleeping, making sure that they're safe. And, I hear so many people say that they just stared at the baby through the night, and, what I always tell people is, are they pink? And do you see their chest rising and falling? Because if you do, then you're pretty sure that they're breathing, but some people just say, oh gosh, we just stayed up all night staring, making sure that we couldn't tell. We didn't, because they're sleeping. And so, yeah, having that support when you're in that learning process of in that the sleepless nights is such a wonderful thing to have in place and something I didn't think about. So thank you for mentioning that. And yeah, it sounds like what you were saying about not having an outcome planned, like
not knowing exactly how the birth is going to go down, or the postpartum is going to go down, but being able to listen and hear what you're feeling. It sounds like that is really important. What comes to mind is those fast births, when you don't have time to really slow down, take a breath, take a moment, and even say what's happening, whether it's a natural, beautiful, fast birth where the baby comes out effortlessly, or it's a fast medical intervention that happened, I think in both instances, people can be really caught off guard, and it can create trauma just from the very fact that there was no time to say, let me take a breath, let me hear what's happening, and then let me put one foot in front of the other and choose to go toward this, right? There's no time for that. And I love the fact that you are talking about having choice, because you mentioned like a sword, having a sword, like as if we have to kind of fight our way through birth, but it's also a choice to put down the sword, right? But if we don't have time to make that choice, then I think there's that moment can live in our bodies, and we're embodying so much. The process of birth is embodiment, like we were talking about before, that it's easy for those moments of fear, those moments of anxiety, those moments of I can't catch my breath, to remain embodied. And then you start moving forward into the postpartum where you just don't have time for yourself, and they can be remain embodied for many years. So I think that the postpartum work, I, we haven't defined postpartum, but if you look it up on websites, people will say 6 weeks, postpartum lasts 6 weeks. And I really think postpartum lasts for as long as you're still processing things from the birth, and maybe even your whole life, is postpartum, because we're completely changed after the baby. So it's a good reminder it's never too late to reach out to a birth professional or someone who can listen and hear, and yeah, all that stuff.
I was going to just interlude for 1 second on that, the postpartum process. I think it's really important for moms to know that there's a lot of shame culture around postpartum, and even in birth, and even in pregnancy, becoming pregnant. All of these choices that women have around their healthcare and their centered healthcare for themselves, taking agency in that is like a really important step, because there's so many choices. And the culture of shame and what one should do, as if birth should look a certain way. Birth should be this beautiful, natural, in home, in water. Or another mom might think birth should be in a hospital with an epidural. And another mom might think birth should look like a cesarean birth, where she gets her, her scheduled birth that really works for her. And I think that that's really important for women to understand. Birth should not look any other way than you desire it to look. We have to take all the should. Birth should be, formula should be not used, pacifier should not be used. I think that there is general information and guidance out there as to how these tools, and I like to call them tools in a toolbox, can benefit a family along their journey or a baby along their journey. I don't think any tool in a birth box should be considered negative, because it creates a culture of shame. And I think that that really does disservice to moms and families as to what something should look like. Birth can look like many things, and beautiful births come in all sizes, all shapes, all types of birth. One neither better nor worse than the other. I feel like it is knowing yourself and what you desire from it, and also, like you said, being open to that journey might look different. And sometimes we don't always know the why, and that's a really hard process to go through.
And having a doula or a birth professional can really be great to help a family or a mom sort of sift through, like you said, those really fast births, or at the same token, where a medical event and helping sift through what happened, because sometimes things do happen really fast and we don't understand the why in the moment. So sometimes having a birth professional to help in that safe, non-judgmental space, just to understand what happened to a mom, a baby, or a family on their journey, can be a really healing experience too. So I just make an invitation to moms and families out there to take the shoulds out of what birth should be, because birth can be so many things. It can be beautiful, it can be raw, it can be terrifying, it can be painful, it can be orgasmic. I mean, when you think of the realm of what birth can be, like, to really focus on those opportunities that are out there, like to just be open to receive the journey and the experience. I think it's one of the hardest things that I think I even struggle with in life, is to just receive. And I think when a family and a mom can really look at that journey in that way, I feel like birthing from within and specific is not an outcome-based birth mentorship or birth class or birth journey. It really is just about the journey of creating that the deep inner listening to what a family and a mom desires for their experience. And then also, like you said, it's this really delicate balance to releasing it to what the journey is to be for that particular family, that particular mom, that particular birth, because every birth is different.
Yeah. Thank you so much for naming that shame culture. I think that that's such an important topic, shame culture, in especially in the pregnancy realm and the postpartum realm. And there's
there's an aspect to like idealism, you know, there's all this information about breastfeeding and about, you know, these beautiful births that you see on Instagram, and there's attachment parenting, and there's so many different ideals out there, you know, and I think the most important ideal is to have a parent, a mother, a birthing parent, a primary care provider who feels good and can nourish their child, because you know when you're on an airplane they tell you to put your own mask on in case of an emergency before you put the child's mask on, because you can't help anybody if you're running out of what you need, right? So there's this like balance of, sure, there's ideals, but you know what, if you need to reach for a bottle of formula, there's no shame in that. Or if you choose to formula feed, there's no shame in that. And it's just you knowing what you need, right? And I love this. I love walking that line of, you know, this is what I really want for my family, and really like searching for all of the tools. And this is kind of how I personally approach life, and a lot of the people that I work with kind of approach life because they resonate with me, and they like this kind of care that I provide. But I love exploring and discovering and digging and working for more and more tools, at the same time finding balance of what do I really need in this moment? Do I need to keep on digging for tools to have that ideal that I wanted, or do I need to just put that down, take a nap, and restore myself in whatever shape or form that means right now?
Yes, because I also feel like making decisions, one has to be clear-headed, and I feel like that we're all learning that there's so much that goes into our health, the food we eat, the information that we intake, social media, whether that be personal from friends or family. All of this is information that's coming into our body at light speed that has never come in before. So I think a lot of us that were raised in the time of not having Facebook or Instagram or 24-hour news sources, you know, one had to go to the library and get the microfiche to find the article that you were looking for. And maybe there was 5 articles, not 5,000 articles that you had to sift through. And it's
Right.
a lot of information.
Yeah.
And it causes our mind not to rest, like what you were saying. So sometimes to take that moment to pause, to rest, to use that time to sort of sift through everything that you've taken in is really just as valuable as to keep taking in, like you said, the search, the hunt, the hunt. Sometimes it's good to just pause and to allow your body and your mind to take all of that in, to then decide, what do I believe? Is that something that I still believe to be true for me? Like, where do my birth beliefs come from? Was it because I saw, I don't know, something in a movie, or I've actually seen my brother, sisters, family members be birthed, and it was a beautiful experience, or on the other end of the spectrum, it was something that was quite traumatic. And I think when women and families understand why they get to believe, or why they believe certain things, and then start to take those beliefs and sift through them, is this still something that I resonate with? Yes. Okay, well, why? Is it something that I don't resonate with? No. Okay, so I'm going to discard that. And I feel like this sort of listening really allows families to be able to take that pause moment and to sift through all of the information that they already have to help them head off into a direction to feel more confident and comfortable and secure in their own choices, but also whom they've chosen to help them along this journey, to guide them. Because an OB, a doula, any sort of birth support does not have your baby for you. You
Right.
know, it's really an inner journey, and to have that support is so important. Where you feel supported, you feel loved. And if you do need to take that pause moment to ask, or to share, or to ask for guidance, that what you're receiving, you know, is built on a base of trust and good open communication that's respectful.
That's a great it's a great time to get back to that first question that I had, and I wanted to save it for later. It was about how do we move through the pregnancy and all these different phases and stages that have different needs, and how do we find the right care provider, and what happens if we decide we haven't found the right care provider, then what, and I think I see a lot of people getting stuck here because there's so many layers to the then what. Then I have to find out what decisions I have to make. Then I have to make those decisions. Then I have to come to the table in conflict, bringing, not fighting necessarily, but now bringing these new revelations that I've had, that I'm not aligning with this person that I once was aligning. So then there's the conversation, and then there's a lot of people pleasing that we do. How do we, get our needs met without being, either the bitch or the people pleaser, or just accepting those, those archetypes that are put on us, or, how do we move through that? Wait a minute, something's not right here. How do we find the right provider, the right birth team, the right doula? And if that needs to change, how do we shift?
Oh, I love this question.
Oh, good. I
So,
thought I was asking too much. I was like, oh man,
no,
I'm putting her on the
because
spot.
no, because I realize this is something that so many families and women struggle with. Like, and usually it happens by asking their friends, like, who did you choose to help you on this journey? Who is your OB? Who is your midwife? And they go straight for that person that resonated with, their friends. And this is a great place to start. But I think the best place to start is to know thyself. Like 5 questions, 5 non-negotiables for a mom. And even if 5 is overwhelming to her, I say write 2, or start with 1 a day. Non-negotiables in your birth that you desire, that are really important to you. And it can be something as simple as like open communication. I want a home birth, or I know that I want an OB that supports me getting an epidural because this is something that I really desire in my birth. So it can be something very simple as like, I want a respectful birth environment. Well, okay, but what does that mean to you? Does that mean that if you're going through a surge or contraction, you don't want to be touched? Because, in some settings in a hospital birth, this might not be possible. And this is something that a mom might have to understand, that if she's choosing a certain birth environment or a certain birth care provider, that these are things that need to be openly talked about. So it might seem kind of mundane or silly, even to a mom's needs, when she writes these down on a piece of paper, like, I don't want to be touched during birth. Like, she might feel kind of like, how do I even express this to my care provider? Like,
Right. Or am I allowed that, am I allowed to not be touched in my birth? Well, of course. And at some point you might want to be touched because you might welcome the help, but it ultimately it's your body.
But it's also to get her thinking and just be open to not like glued to, yes, this is exactly what's going to happen. Because as we know, as birth, professionals, what a mom desires on one day is not necessarily what she desires during her birth. It's just a learning and listening process. And this is why I think the listening to what is happening presently in your body is so important, and being able to act on that and being able to ask for what you need. I feel like those are the important skills, more than like a mom knowing exactly what she wants or how she wants it. Those are the skills that I think are really great for moms to develop if they aren't already comfortable doing that in their daily lives. I'm realizing a lot of women aren't, maybe because of how they were raised or the shoulds of how they think a woman or a girl, or however she had developed this, or at what age she developed these core beliefs that belong to her now as a woman, like where those came from. And depending upon where she is in her journey, that looks like a lot of different things. For some moms, it is really hard for them to speak up and to ask for what they want, even if it's, I'm hot, can you please turn the temperature down in the room? For some moms, this is really uncomfortable because they feel like they're being a burden. But in reality, like, this is her time to shine. This is her day. So I think developing those skills of like the 5 core things of what you need and what you desire in your birth can be a really great place to start to help a mom choose the right care provider. Because if she then starts to interview, and that's really what it is, she's interviewing this care provider to be there on her journey, just like she would interview a doula. And if you start to see inconsistencies, I don't like to call them red flags, because I don't think there's any care provider out there that is innately bad or evil. I really want to believe that. I believe that there are care providers that have learned a certain skill from what their beliefs and whom they've chosen to help them on their journey of learning that skill of being able to be that guidance system for a family or for a mom on that day, for a woman on that day. And I believe that it's not necessarily that they're a bad care provider. Is it not the right one for me? Sure, that can be said, and that's completely valid. So I think knowing what your needs are and then being able to go to an interview or an open conversation forum, if we want to call it that, just so it's more relaxed, like a getting to know each other session. Well, like how do you care for your, even if they use the word patients? Well, I'm not sick. Am I a patient or am I a client? You know, like it can even be something really small that would kind of make a mom turn inward, or just be able to question, is this the right person? Because I'm already seeing some not, you can use the word inconsistency, some differences in what our core birth beliefs are. So if a mom chooses to continue along that path, I always am welcoming to let them know that this can create, yes, conflict. We can use the word because it can happen, you know, and it can build, and it can build quite quickly. And then you said, like, there's a point where a mom feels like she does not have a way out because maybe she's now at 39 weeks or 38 weeks, or on the day of her birth, this has happened, where she realizes, like, this is just not, I'm not feeling supported here. So I think by a family and a mom asking these questions, that they know that they are non-negotiables for them, and not necessarily how the birth happens, but really like what they need and what they're desiring in terms of being supported. Like if you're choosing a care provider that you know has a very high cesarean rate, you know, to know that that is a real thing that could happen on that day, where is what that care provider is telling you really, does that need to happen? You know, so to be able to create this sense of trust and openness and respectful communication, I believe it starts with the core birth beliefs of knowing what you need and why you're asking for these things. So if you can choose to align yourself with a care provider who already has those beliefs and that system set up and believes in whatever your views of birth are, and it doesn't, and I also say this, not everyone has to match up, because it's going to be very challenging to find a care provider where everything is in alignment. So that's why I always am welcoming my families. Choose 5, because it can be really overwhelming. Sometimes moms come with a list of like an entire book of like, here's my birth beliefs, and a care provider kind of gets a little like, oh, I don't even know if I can provide all of those things. You know, it can be just as overwhelming for a care provider. And being able to see both sides, that a care provider wants to be able to provide you with the birth that you desire. But the fact of the matter is this care provider doesn't know what this journey is going it doesn't, he or she doesn't know what's going to happen either. All they can do is tell you what makes them feel comfortable and confident, just like a mom or a family does. A care provider is human. They're not robots. They have feelings, they have emotions, they made decisions in births where maybe things have turned out challenging for them and they wish they could have chosen differently. So kind of, I always welcome families to see them as human too, and to ask them maybe why they believe what they believe, because sometimes when we bring humanness into the conversation, that is the connection. And sometimes that's all we need to break that barrier of like that we're trying to come in as families and break down all these walls and do things so differently and be rebels. And sometimes care providers, like, they're like, whoa, I don't know what to do, like, because they have a lot of responsibility. Like, this is why I have not decided to walk this journey, and this is something that we've talked a lot about. I admire that so much in you. Like, I don't want the responsibility right now of keeping a mom and baby safe. Like, this is not something that my heart has been, it's been called to, but not strong enough yet. That is a huge responsibility. So when we can look at care providers in that sense and really have compassion for them, that they're acting out of a place of safety for mom and baby. So it's really finding that alignment and making sure that those, whatever that looks like, that there's similarities there. Because if there's similarities, I think that one does not need to change a care provider if everything doesn't align. I think it's open communication. Are you being respected? Are you being heard? Do you trust what that care provider is telling you? And there's little things along the way, along this journey, that will be little listening spots for moms and families to start to take this in. Like, if they go for a sugar test, and the way that test is run makes them uncomfortable, well, that's a little sign right there to listen. Do you have to walk away at the first turn? No. Having a birth support or a doula to help guide you if needed, to ask questions to see if that care provider is willing to open up the conversation to sort of shift things to how mom is feeling internally, it feels right for her to do. Well, that's a good starting place. If there's change there, then one doesn't always need to walk away and clean their hands of the situation. And I feel like those little, I will call them not tests, I don't like that word, opportunities. Okay, let's put this, yes, let's see if there's opportunities for us to sort of create maybe some open communication within these little, if you want to call them conflicts or differences of opinion. I feel like those are the moments that help guide the trust alongside, many other moments with moms, to know that, okay, I've chosen the right person. And sometimes it's not going to happen in one meeting. Sometimes it takes time. This is the person that you're choosing to help support you on that day. It may be a flash moment where a mom just meets with a care provider and feels like, this is a person, I hope they say yes to me, like that sort of thing. But it also can be like a slow, challenging process where you said it's a lot of sitting in discomfort. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how this is going to turn out. And all of that is practice for birth. So everything can almost be like a practice contraction, because there's so many opportunities for us as women and as families to get uncomfortable with the process of birth and through the process of birth, that to use every opportunity to be able to breathe through these moments, to take pause moments, to just settle into not knowing. All of that is really great practice for the journey of birth.
It's such a balance, isn't it? I mean, it's really a dance and a delicate balance, because you can say, okay, breathe through it, and breathe through it can mean so many different things to people. It can mean suffer through it. It can mean just get through it and don't worry about it, or it can mean really feel it and feel if this is a yes or no moment for you. And I love that you talked about opportunities to have conversations and come to conflict, because the word conflict has a negative connotation, but there's it's come to the conversation. Brene Brown calls it the arena, right? Come to the arena and show up. And for someone to be able to have someone like you in their corner to help them have these conversations, I think it's so great, because um culturally we're just not I think in general, this is a blanket statement, I don't think we have the tools to deal with conflict and really say, this is a yes, this is a no, and this is what I need right now, and do it in a way that feels good. So I know that I would definitely have could have used your services in my life, not just in birth, but in my life, when it was those moments of, do I run away or do I come to the arena and show up? And if I do come to the arena and show up, when do I create a real boundary and say, no, this is not for me, and then walk away, having had that, um, that moment to an opportunity to have that conversation? Or does it turn into an opportunity to keep on working together and being in that conversation and in that care relationship with someone? So yeah, those are all really great points. And then I would imagine that if your boundary is very firm and you say, no, this is not the care provider for me, I would imagine that your doula can very easily help you find more people to interview. Um, Another idea that came up, this is the first time I thought it, I don't know why, but if you are having a feeling, if someone listening is having a feeling that this is not the right care provider, why not just interview someone else? It doesn't mean that you have to change. And I think a lot of people get stuck in the, I don't know what to do next. I don't even know what to think next. And so there's this like block, this kind of stopping of the flow of, where you actually want to be. But I think it would be a great idea to just go to another care provider and just interview them or have one visit and just see if it feels better, and it's an easy way to get more information and keep that movement going of this doesn't quite feel right, but without having to commit to making a decision.
Right. And I think all of this is very helpful because what I've noticed too is like a lot of women, they do feel stuck. And in that stuckness of not only being able to not know how to do it or how to say it, or if they even have that choice, because so many women are also trapped in the world of insurance, which can be really frustrating too, to know that they have this book of choices and that can feel really stuck. And then to try to get on the phone with your insurance company, it can be like a whole day event and it becomes very draining and exhausting. So I think a lot of a lot of women do feel stuckness. So having somebody there who can just say, okay, this is where we're at. How do we get to where you want to be? And giving small steps and sort of breaking it down and giving that guidance and that space to just say, okay, yes, right now things are kind of messy, but they're going to be messy and then we're going to find a way. And to really find somebody there to support you through those moments where I feel like also it's to be said, I get this question asked a lot. Well, why should I take a birth class? What can I learn? And I think, well, if we all would desire to have this perfect birth as we created in our head, no one would need to take a birth class, right? Because you get everything you want.
Yeah.
But we know that this is generally that the birth fairy or the challenges or the conflicts or whatever we decide, like you said, conflict is not always a negative connotation. These are the moments where we get to know we've chosen the right support system, because when things are good, no one needs to ask questions. Things are just as is, as we desire them. I feel like the things we want to brush under the rug, the conflicts, the challenges, this is where we get to know, have we chosen the right people to support us? Am I feeling supported? Because if everything is going as we desired, we don't get opportunities to know these things. So in a way, if we reframe it to not be a negative thing, but to get women to say like, okay, this is an opportunity, a blessing for me to see like, oh, okay, I'm feeling some sort of way. Now I get an opportunity to create change or to create an open container for change. And without having these instances in pregnancy, or one would only get to know this one on the birthday if this comes up, like on, yeah. So to maybe just shift perspective, just like, not happening to us, but happening for me. This is happening for me to see something. And when we deeply listen, this is the invitation. And to be able to have support system around you that can sort of guide you through this, I feel like it's really helpful for moms, because it's scary to not know where to turn. Can I change? How do I ask for my records? Am I going to be seen up as I'm breaking up with my care provider? This is hard. It's hard to do. And to have this guidance system can be really helpful for moms to know that they're never alone. And a really great thing is, like, I always am open to sharing this with moms. It's never too late, ever. If you decide on the first moment you're 6 weeks pregnant and you walk into your care provider and you see that on their intake sheet, we do not allow the support of doulas. We do not allow hypnobirthing. We don't allow certain birthing from within classes. Well, this is like a really big sign, like a flashing sign. If this is one of your core beliefs, well, then maybe that's the right time to walk away in that moment. But for a lot of women, it's not as clear. It can be very muddy waters where they start to see little things, the little niggles. I call them little niggles. When you don't listen to those, they get louder. And at one point, it's going to be so loud that you cannot ignore it anymore. And for some families, this happens very late. It might happen on the day of birth, where something happens, and I've been in support of women who've decided to walk away in labor to go find a supportive care provider for their vision because it was that loud for them. And then along the way, anywhere in between, to help be able to get records, to understand that you're not in a box, even with your insurance. Like, yes, you have to put in the work because it generally just doesn't happen magically. But having the guidance system to be able to break it down into smaller pieces for a mom to understand so she doesn't feel so overwhelmed with the change. This is where I feel like a doula or a birth professional can really be supportive to families so it doesn't feel so overwhelming and she doesn't feel so stuck.
Right. This is making me want to create a guide for, how to change care providers, a little checklist. But speaking of actionable things, I really love the fact that you gave this actionable exercise of writing down your non-negotiables. And, you held up the book when you were like, oh, here's a list. And that book, actually, when you have all those pages, it's not so much your non-negotiables, it's more of your birth plan, how you see it unfolding, what procedures you'd like, and what newborn procedures you'd like. But the non-negotiables, that's so wonderful, because once you have those, you don't need every little detail written out, because you know where you're coming from, and that care provider knows where you're coming from. So one, I wanted to just thank you for giving us that exercise, because a lot of the conversation can seem so like, what are we really talking about? So in order to ground into that exercise, could you give some more examples of what you've seen people come up with as their non-negotiables?
Yeah, so one that I know was important to myself in birth was like being heard by my care provider and deep listening. That was something that I was working on at the time of my birth. So being able to have that safe space and to say what my fears were if my care provider were to say something that were to maybe not align with my birth beliefs, like just to be able to have open communication and not be immediately shut down, which is something that I had experienced in my journey of finding the right care provider. That was like a non-negotiable for me. Like if I said something like, and I was shut down before I could finish what I was saying, this was a non-negotiable for me personally. It can be like delayed cord. It could be something as simple as like delayed cord clamping. That's really a mom is passionate about. And if she's going to choose a care provider that when she opens up this conversation is like, no, I only believe in 30 seconds of delayed cord clamping, and she wants to wait until the pulsing stops. Well, this is this is a challenge. Like this is not going to go away on the day of birth. So it can be having a supportive birth environment. And I know that's really broad, but a mom then has to go inward to say, okay, well, how do I feel supported in my daily life? When do I not feel supported? What do I need to feel supported? I feel like sometimes the questions can go a little bit deeper and she has to sort of define what that is for her or why she's feeling a certain way. Because sometimes this inner knowing where we know something like as a gnosis, but we don't know why. And those are the things that we really have to listen to. Because I don't think in this culture, a lot of times we're brought up to really understand or to question, because some things just are the way they are, right? You don't question them. But I think along this birth journey, a non-negotiable could be like, I would like it to be dark. maybe it's something that simple, but she has to understand the why. Is it darkness because she's feeling safety, because she doesn't want to be seen? Like, what is it about that specific statement to her? Why is that important? So non-negotiables can be anything, as complex as a mom wants to feel she needs, or as simple. And this is what I feel creates that safety within mom to be able to come to her care provider and be like, these are my non-negotiables in birth. And yes, it's going to be challenging if you decide I would like a home birth, a natural birth, to give birth in the water. Like, these are birth preferences. Like,
Right.
I even try to steer moms away from like plan, because plan is very finite. We
Right.
cannot plan birth, you know? And I
Yeah.
think it's a word that so many of us are used to using, just like C-section. Like, this word kind of gives me like, ugh. I like to change the semantics of you know, cesarean birth, because it is still a birth. So it's the way we look at things and how we see things. So I think that understanding what preferences are and what your non-negotiables are is also really important for moms to understand, for families to understand about why things are important to them. So I think just like birth, non-negotiables can be as small or as large as a mom needs. And this, being able to define these things for her, is going to be the first step in finding the right care provider to her. Because when she goes to her, you know, her open meetings to be able to discuss these things with her care provider, you know, you don't want to come with a list of 20 things, because your care provider is generally going to shut down. But if she is able to go with one or two of her non-negotiables each time she meets with her care provider to open up these conversations, this is going to be paramount in her being able to decide, have I chosen the right care provider? When I bring up these non-negotiables for myself, are they being welcomed, or am I being welcomed with open arms, or am I immediately, like in my case and so many other women's cases, they're being shut down before they even finish their sentences?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's often hard to get that listening, that being heard, that being able to express yourself and be that have compassionate listening sometimes. But there are the care providers that provide that also. You know, they're out there. Not all of them value that, but they are out there. So I think you're right about that.
I wanted to kind of, before asking you the last two questions, just kind of give you space. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover? There's so many good topics. And is there anything that, is there anything that's on your mind? Or do you want to move on?
I think for me as a doula and my growth process over the last 10 years has been so great. I mean, when I first was called to doing doula work, I realize now from my birthing from within journey as a mentor, like where I was and how I had my own birth beliefs. And they were pretty stringent when I started as a doula, how birth should look. You know, and it's been an evolution process for myself. And I just feel so honored to be able to work with families and care providers that it really is a working relationship for me where I learn so much from each family that I'm honored to be in that space with, and each time I'm able to grow. And I feel like this is just something that's really important for me as a doula, and how I believe my heart and soul is to serve the community, is to be that open space and to really be able to provide a service where families feel loved and supported along whatever the journey of birth and pregnancy and postpartum brings. For me, this is where my heart-centered work is really at right now. And I feel like there's so many birth professionals out there, and I feel like each woman or each family, there's a doula that's right for them, just like there's a care provider for every different situation, every family, every soul out there. So I feel like just being able to be heard and seen is really important for me to have like that reciprocity in my working relationships where I'm able to serve families. So yeah, I think this is what my heart is really being drawn towards right now, is being that open service space where there is that reciprocity and learning and sharing and just being able to be on that journey with that family just as much as they are, because it really is that for birth professionals. You know, we are just on the journey as well. We don't have the crystal ball, and I think if we did, it would be a little different, you know, to see how an outcome was going to be. So I feel like for me, it's really allowing families to feel that after their birth, that they have felt loved and supported and heard, and even if the birth fairy comes and she sprinkles her dust, that through all of that, the challenges, the tears, the happiness, the laughs, the joy, because there's so many emotions that happened during the process of birth that never for once did they not feel supported. I feel like from my end, this is what is really important for me as a doula and how I serve and how I would like to serve my community.
Beautiful. And thank you for wanting to serve like that, because even just in this conversation where, I didn't have a baby and you didn't doula me through my birth, even just in the conversation, I've received so much from you. And, even just the shift in language and, empowering, shifting beliefs about how to view things is more empowering how to empower ourselves. So thank you for your dedication. The last two questions are, I actually have an answer for one of these questions that I would like to say too. So the one question is, what's your best advice for pregnancy, birth, postpartum? You can give one for each, or you can give one general, you can give one piece of advice or three pieces of advice, but what's your best advice? And the second question is what is something that they don't tell you about pregnancy, birth, or postpartum? And one thing that I wanted to mention after having a conversation is one thing that they don't tell you about pregnancy, birth, and postpartum is that when you go to the birth room, especially if you're birthing in a hospital, possibly a birth center, home birth not so much because you kind of know who's in your home, but when you go to have your baby, other people may enter the room who do not belong there or do not need to be there. Students, residents who are not in that particular floor, people who are being trained. They can oftentimes enter your birth room, and sometimes they'll even try to perform a vaginal exam in birth, and they won't. Sometimes they won't tell you. So I think that to know that you have the right to say, I want my privacy. No one is allowed in the room except for my care providers, whether that's the nurse, the doctor, the certified nurse, midwife, whatever it is, and that you're not welcoming students, to experiment on you. I mean, if you do welcome students, go ahead. That's beautiful, but they don't tell you that sometimes they'll bring people in the room without asking you first, and sometimes they will not tell you that they're in training, that it's not necessary for them to touch you or perform procedures on you. And so just be aware that you can speak up before that birth happens and say, the only people who are touching me are my care providers,
Yeah. Can you repeat the first question? Because in my deep listening practice, I'm like really trying to listen, but I forgot the first question. I got the second one, but I forgot the first one.
Well, let's start with the second one then. But the first one was, what's your best advice for pregnancy, birth, postpartum?
Okay, my best advice for pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, and I know this is really tough because I'm trying to practice this in my own life, is to be open to the journey itself. And I know it sounds really broad, but I think to be open to change, to shifts. And also, I feel like my other piece of advice would be to use this opportunity to get to know thyself, because I think that is one of the core pieces that so many women and families struggle with. Because if you don't know what your own beliefs are, you don't know yourself, when you go into situations where the change or the conflict happens, there's no solid ground within yourself. So if you're not grounded in your beliefs, then that becomes really muddy waters to know like why you want something, why you don't want something, but also being open to the idea that I really do believe this. No tool in the birth toolbox is innately bad. So when you hear epidural, vacuum, cesarean birth, like all of these things that were formula, like pacifiers, all of these things that we're told of as being shameful sometimes in birth, depending upon who's using the language, it depends on which the intention, on which the care provider or the intention of the mother or the person choosing to have that tool used during birth. So I really like to welcome families and women and people to understand that for me, what's the most important piece of advice is to not like to try to be as open-minded as possible and to know yourself and to know why you believe certain things. Because I feel like when you start to peel back the layers of those onions, a lot of times we realize what we believe. We're like, we don't even believe that. Or I'm like, I believe that because Phoebe on Friends told me this is true. I don't, whatever it is. You know what I mean? Like, we realize it's almost so ridiculous sometimes why we really, I believe it's because of this. Well, I'm going to discard that because that's really not on solid ground. Or we realize that it's a real core belief that we believe in and that we are willing to fight for that in some way. And I feel like that piggybacks onto the second question, which for me is like that you always have a choice, even when you feel you don't. There's always a choice to be made. And sometimes it's not as grand as you believe it to be, even if it's for a mom this comes to mind a lot, when a mom has the journey from maybe home birth to having a transfer to a birthplace to the hospital to then having another transfer of birth to a cesarean birth, like this can be a really challenging journey for a mom. And I feel like just knowing that even in that moment before her cesarean birth, that she has an active choice to choose to like push her baby, or even if it's something really small, it's an active choice to choose to not feel as if something is just happening to her. But even if it's that small, I feel like a mom always knowing she has a choice to make in birth, even if it's big as like on the day of I do not feel comfortable, I'm going to check out of this hospital, wherever she's birthing center. I'm going to tell my midwife, like, we are breaking up. Like, it's just not working for her, that she always has a choice, even if it's big or small. So I just really want families and women to know that they're never stuck.